Let me ask, what should you do if you were to encounter a damsel who is oblivious and innocent at any given time, and unconcerned and unfeeling in any given situation? If it were me, I could at least challenge her to a fight. But if it were you, with your conscience, I would stay away from her.
What if I told you that everything that happened in the Luna 4 Archon quest went exactly according to plan? According to the Tsaritsa's plans, that is. That Columbina's presence in Hisi Island just a couple months before Moon Prayer Night and the traveler's arrival was all a part of an elaborate chess move. In fact, Columbina's ardent wish to go back to the moon was the catalyst that would provide the Fatui Harbingers with the powerful god they wanted on their side, who was in no way aligned with the heavenly principles or even beholden to them at all. This is the Unlikely Genshin Gamer, and I think this has all been a rather successful hoax. It may seem to some as though Columbina didn't fulfill the role that was cast for her early on, that she's been retconned, or so they say. But I don't think so. She has played her part most perfectly. The Harbinger most suited to having the traveler and everyone else around her fulfilling her every wish, which never truly deviated from the Tsaritsas. This isn't to say that Columbina was maliciously using the traveler, but she's not against what the Fatui stand for either. In fact, the reason she left them was because she got tired of hanging out with the Doctor for the most part, not because she has grown disillusioned with the Tsaritsa's plans, or grown to love the heavenly principles. She never took offense to the Fatui's methods or the Tsaritsa's end goals as far as I know. Meaning, now that she's become the Trilune goddess, she is still very much an asset to the team of the Harbingers, just not in name. When Tartaglia said he couldn't understand why she was number 3, it's because her specific value was as yet unfulfilled. The Tsaritsa needed the unlikely team of her number 2 and number 3 Harbingers for a specific lofty purpose. One was obsessed with making a god, and the other was simply a god missing her power. Put them together, and you have what just happened. And mind you, both the Fatui footmen and Dottore himself say those two got along the best. In fact, they were like siblings. We know what Dottore has been like since his youth, so to be so close to him is a little questionable in my book. But all that aside, all we need to do is take stock of the state of affairs after the events at the end of Luna 4 to see that the Fatui made away with a rather clean sweep. The real moon has re-entered the false sky, meaning Columbina is at peak power, likely more so than the rest of Archons, because she doesn't have to answer to the heavenly principles and isn't bound by a gnosis. The Fatui, through her, can now access the traveler's high-tech ship. They simply need to send Arlecchino to ask her. And Columbina can now manipulate all the areas that the 3 Moon Sisters controlled. She's either just below the 4 Shades now, or else right on level with them. In addition, Harbinger number 4, Arlecchino, now has a moon marrow that likely gives her even more mastery over death, and simply more power overall. The Doctor has demonstrated that the false sky can be opened without consequence, with sufficient power, which, by the way, was done to let the true moon in. Dottore isn't stupid. He wouldn't have opened it for nothing, like it seemed. And when he unzipped the sky, what did he say? Behold the false moon's fall. Columbina might as well should have been up there saying, thanks, bro. In fact, maybe she did. I truly doubt that Columbina, who delivered the last hit, actually killed him. Remember, she can manipulate time and space just like he did. He could be anywhere right now. And To round out the Fatui's haul, there is a brand new, fully updated world formula, one that factors in the latest descender. This is admittedly huge. Now, all of this probably sounds confusing. Like, weren't they going against the Tsaritsa? Didn't she send Tartaglia to give her permission to kill Dottore? Didn't Columbina leave and Dottore actually go rogue? Yes and no. Just as Nefer noted that Columbina anticipated the patterns of behavior her friends would take, the way she could lead them to figure out how to help her, knowing just what they would think to do or try. I believe the Tsaritsa and Piero know exactly how the motley crew of heretics they put together will act at any given time. When they are acting on their seemingly selfish desires, they are in fact moving in accordance with her plans. I think if nothing else, the Tsaritsa is a master strategist. Otherwise, how would she control the power group she has assembled? If they ever teamed up against her, that would perhaps spell the end of her plans. But she knows they can't cooperate with each other enough to do that. And you can't tell me that the promise of a new future is enough to hold back all desires, grudges, and temptations that might appear. In fact, it would seem as though they've been always doing what they want instead of should. Except that's fine. Or else, the Harbingers would be the most inefficient set of butt-hurt powerful maniacs that ever came to be. And yet, important advancements keep happening. The reasons they hate society and join her cause in the first place work in her favor and give her insight into how to best use them. Who better than Rosalind to send to put Mondstadt under her thumb? If she needed to capitalize on the yawning backdoor into the ley lines that is Natlan, who better to send than the righteous warrior who had a deep connection to the land? Repairing Natlan's ley lines didn't go against her plans. Capitano, of course, wanted Renova to choose the path that she did, and knew that she would. If she had lifted the curse of immortality, important Conrians like Piero and Dane would have dropped dead on the spot, likely messing up quite a few things. The Tsaritsa could not have risked that. He played his role well. A Fatui Harbinger is now fused with the Lord of the Night. To have this sort of access to the ley lines is obviously monumental, because Lumine was able to use this backdoor, with permission, to create the Conria Atlas. And in time, Dottore, who I don't believe is gone for a second, will likely be able to access Irminsul for that Irminsul burning scene from the Winter Night's Lazo. And speaking of the Doctor, Dottore's quest to build a god went hand in hand with the resident goddess in their ranks, who yearned to gain her power. So every piece moved on that board as they should have, including unfortunate Sandrone. Rest assured that the Tsaritsa's plan is still on track. But then one might ask, what exactly did Columbina do to achieve this upgrade? The time shenanigans can get confusing quickly. But time travel was integral to this plan, and I'm certain that Dottore, after studying the moons for so long, and being around since the time of Rerir and Thelindis, knows what a moon gate is and where it led. That place, the moon's reflection, was instrumental in the plan with its time travel nature. So, to understand what happened, we finally need to understand Teyvat's timeline, because what she did spanned the entire thing. Now, I highly recommend you watch my video on Teyvat's complete timeline, which will be coming out soon. But to summarize here what she did, you'll need to understand a few key points in the history. The Nibelung period, the War of Funerary Flame, the Cataclysm, and the Paimonian era. But Paimon appearing is truly the most recent thing to have happened in the world of Teyvat, because it's safe to say by now no one, not even the ancient dragons, know what the hell she is. She's a recent development fit to name an age. It can't be the Traveler since they've been here for 500 years. Now, the Nibelung period is the point in time when the Dragon King Nibelung ruled before he left to travel through space looking for other worlds. To take care of the world while he was gone, he raised up the 3 Moon Sisters and their corresponding moons. Each had authority over an aspect of reality and ruled the night sky with her moon's light when it was her turn. They kept the world turning on its axis and functioning properly. But then the Primordial One arrived and eventually fought back the Dragon Sovereigns and reshaped the land. The Moon Sisters couldn't stop them from taking over, but neither did the Primordial One actually want to get rid of the sisters either. So, all is well, for humankind at least, up until the War of Funerary Flame, which is when Nibelung finally comes back from gallivanting off in space. He's been poisoned with the abyss and is hopping mad. Think of it like a raging mad drunk comes home to find someone else handling his family and doing a bad job of it, because the Primordial One was not taking care of dragonkind. But the kids actually don't want him back, because he's breaking things left, right, and center. Sorry for the unsavory imagery, but that is exactly what Nibelung was doing. He was so poisoned by the abyss that he hurt dragonkind more than he helped them. The abyss sickened many of them to death anyway. The war between these 2 superbly powerful entities, the Primordial One and Nibelung, busted up the world something fierce. And Nibelung got so mad that the Moon Sisters weren't wholeheartedly on his side that he put them in a special prison called the Moon's Reflection, a place that seems just as abstract as it sounds. The reflection of the moon. And then he took their moons to use them as weapons of war. The Primordial One used all their strength to win that war, shattering 2 of the moons to avert the catastrophe coming, and took the 3rd one and simply flung it out beyond the casing called the false sky. This is the point in time that Columbina finds herself at after traveling through that strange space with the backwards music for a while, watching history unfold in reverse. To make this whole time trouble make sense, it's best if we start at the furthest point in the past and then note where the timeline doubles on itself. This past that I'm about to recount was always the past. But for Columbina, who lived it in reverse, it is her future. What did Columbina do exactly? During her travels through time, Columbina made stops here and there, leaving notes and interfering where she could with events. The older the event in real life, the later in her odd journeys when she did it, inadvertently leaving a lighted path for her young self, freshly wronged by the Doctor, to follow. Then, just before she decided to stop making these detours, she made a little baby anchor named LunaIVStory, a segment of her very soul. This little beacon, looking forward in time while her mother Columbina looks back, was what allowed Columbina to make those detours in the first place. Basically, by living these events in reverse, Columbina is able to do certain things before they are forbidden because she's doing them in reverse. She needed LunaIVStory to make the changes in real life, but she made the changes first and then placed LunaIVStory in the world to facilitate them. Then, Columbina continues her trek backwards through time, now moving beyond the Paimonian era, back into the time of things like the Cataclysm, and eventually to the point in history where the Moon Sisters reside. Nibelung's moon goddesses eventually meet this time trekker, this visitor from the distant future named Columbina Hyposelenia. Columbina explains the state of affairs from far away in the future to them, where their dead bodies, in the form of moon marrows, have been used by an evil doctor to try to take over the world. They all realize for her to go back home to the future and stop this doctor from destroying the world, she will have to travel forward through time again, but properly, drifting through the full stretch of time like anyone else. Of course, this sounds impossible. And indeed it is, because no one can leave this prison alive. In which case, Columbina will have to leave dead. The plan to leave dead, softly sleeping in the land of Nodcry, waiting to be born afresh, would entail this visitor from the future, Paimonian-era Columbina, sprinkling her body all over Nodcry in the form of fine light called Kuvaki, way back here in the past. That light would exist in the ground, infusing itself into the animals and the plants and very soil of the region. And since it would just be her body, containing very little power and no soul, it would be allowed to leave the prison. As a side note, for those of you who know that the Frost Moon Scion's ability to wield Kuvaki comes from infused moonlight, beware that this power came from Canon, not Columbina. The two moon goddesses' powers are very similar, being both initially derived from the Frost Moon, but the silver blood that Frost Moon Scions have and were trying to refine is best considered light realm energy, not Kuvaki in specific. Canon could only have done that just before she was imprisoned in the moon's reflection, and Columbina arrived to begin her forward march through time again after they were already imprisoned. This is why Lauma has silver moonlit blood, while Columbina, at the time when she was born into the world as a fledgling goddess, only has red blood. I imagine Trilune Columbina, reunited with the Kuvaki all over the land, would have silver blood as well. Now, for Columbina to achieve such a feat, she would need to become a moon goddess who wielded all three authorities, the other sisters' powers. Since they had already lost the ability to live outside of the prison because their moons shattered, and Canon would not stand to be left all alone just because her moon, the Frost Moon, hadn't been broken, the sisters agreed to the transfer of power, which would then leave them dead and powerless enough to leave the prison as well. Columbina absorbed their authorities and sent the lifeless husks now, the moon marrows, into the world, creating the situation we know as the history of the moons, where the Crimson Moon Marrow succumbed to the abyss to not completely die and was worshipped by the Crimson Moon Dynasty. That's why, as they were cleansing her back in Luna 2, she recognized Columbina and called her Hypo one last time. And the Eternal Moon Marrow was stored in a vault with the Frost Moon Scions until Rerir stole it. Lastly, the Frost Moon Essence simply passed to baby Columbina instead of coalescing into a marrow, which is like a moon goddess's gnosis and only appears after she's died. This birth of the young Columbina, an event that first moon chanter Isla actually foresaw, was the important insertion that closes this time loop, making everything neat and tidy. Young Columbina needed to get to know the new variable, as in the Traveler. She needed to make these connections and learn about her friends, and more importantly, she needed to fall into the moon's reflection on Moon Prayer Night so that the loop could proceed to this point. With every part of the plan now in place, Columbina sprinkled her body all over Nodcry in the form of Kuvaki-laden moonlight, hid the Trilune power itself in the Frost Moon, and left her actual soul in the prison, so that when Nefer looked back, she would see all this. So they would know that bringing all three together is what would allow her soul to be yanked out of the prison from the outside. The most intriguing and yet confusing part of this plan was the necessary completion of the New World Formula. I spent perhaps too much time studying René's files, trying to decipher his esoteric teachings, but a few things have jumped out at me, and I think this world formula and its output partially explains why Asmodee kept the travelers from leaving 500 years ago. I'll attempt to explain the world formula business briefly here. I promise it's not rocket science-y, but it is very interesting. So, many of you probably remember René, also known as Narcissenkreuz, from Fontaine, the genius orphan who took it upon himself to save the world from full annihilation. The main points to keep in mind about him are that he was frighteningly smart, and because of that, and his ego, I suppose, while he was still young, he and his adopted brother Jacob calculated a very specific formula for devising the fate of the world, using information from Conria and Remuria. He dubbed this process the world formula. The theory went like this. Nations rise and fall in a cyclical nature, a new one rising from the ashes of their predecessors, and this was called Fortuna. Basically, the cycle of existence of these places and what came next was based on their star-written story. This is a major purpose of the false sky that many people don't realize. Teyvat's story is written in its stars. This goes for people too, including the cyclicality of it. At least, the most powerful ones. Skirk said, in Conria, people believe that powerful individuals have corresponding stellar fortuna. Even should that individual fall, their stellar fortuna would not disappear, but gradually evolve into a new constellation. So basically, same deal applies. When one powerful individual falls, their stars don't go out. Rather, they become the material of a new story in a new constellation. But if a story has no more pages, then it ends. Or better yet, if its writer stops writing. Durin's story quest showed us that very clearly. And for some reason, after the Funerary War, that story writing system broke. The self-contained system, which was designed to work for eternity, doesn't anymore. This is what the world formula of the past portrayed. But it can be extended by introducing variables, also known as descenders. Perhaps its first extension was with the introduction of the Gnosis system, made possible through the inclusion of a different variable, the third descender. And it's possible that Asmodee knew this, and that's why, as Teyvat was in the throes of another annihilation attempt, she kept the only hope for continuation from leaving the planet. The sparks of civilization are all but extinguished, unless we begin to consider introducing variables beyond the existing system. After all, the world is itself the external manifestation of a dream. Fourth descender, fourth cycle. The heavenly principles is asleep, but the dream is cracking all the same. If the world is someone's dream, just like how the dream that the Grand Sage of the Academia was trapping people in was really Nilu's all along, then if the dreamer is in a state where they can't generate any new content, then a new variable will need to be brought into the system. When Narcissenkreuz ran his formula 500 years ago, he did not factor in the Traveler. It's possible that they weren't factored in because of still being locked in nightmares after the battle with Asmodee. But either way, Narcissenkreuz's formula showed that without a brand new variable, basically someone who can generate more story, the real apocalypse, the actual end of Teyvat, was just around the corner. So, Narcissenkreuz set out to become a world maker himself, studying all sorts of strange documents, including one that references an Ajax. By the way, that disaster would have been the all-devouring narwhal devouring the primordial sea. But a couple different things had happened to make that formula obsolete, in addition to the presence of the traveler. Subdued Narcissenkreuz mentions that there is a new shade of life, we now know it's Dottore, and that someone had opened the beast realm. Possibly Tartaglia having awoken the whale when he fell into the abyss. Both events took place after Narcissenkreuz's time. In this day and age, the new threat was Dottore, the false moon heretic. And something truly monumental was required to turn the tides on that disaster. To bring the entire frost moon back into the domain of the false sky would need a new formula. The conclusion I've drawn to the role the formula actually played in the quest of 6.3 was that it literally applied a sweeping new update to Teyvat's story that includes the new storyline that would prevent annihilation. And so, the moment the new update, as we'll call it, was applied, then Columbina could merge all of the distant parts of herself to become the Trilune goddess, and send the Doctor away, whose aspirations to become a god would never be able to rival the real deal, but who was instrumental in bringing her ascension to pass. We should now keep in mind that everything he was doing, the mind and body swapping, the false sky opening, the time manipulation, Columbina can now do with ease. And this is why I've said that for the Fatui, this hasn't been a net loss in the slightest. Columbina may be allied with the Traveler, but she isn't with the Heavenly Principles. And being the enemy of the Traveler was never the Fatui's goal. In fact, I'm quite certain the best case scenario would be to eventually bring him over to their side, which slowly but surely is happening. You can't have a great rebellion against the Heavenly Principles without the resident Descender. And what's more, the Traveler knows their name. The primordial ones, that is. Something people like Orobashi was killed for knowing. Something Durin's quest and the Hexen Circle has showed us is extremely powerful. In the right hands, knowing someone's true name means having true power over them. Yeah, the Fatui are going to want the Traveler in their back pocket when they begin this confrontation. Kudos to Columbina for being so gentle and kind and helpless that the Traveler will now basically do anything for her. In this great showdown that brought back a moon, it would seem in fact that the only people who lost were Dottore and Sandrone. For Sandrone at least, I think this really is the end, at least as we knew her. As an advanced puppet, she can probably be rebuilt or repaired, but her original creator, Alan Giatan, is gone, meaning if she were to be revived, she would likely never be the same again. Poor, selfish, lonely Sandrone, who could never figure out what she wanted but knew what she didn't want, like being a part of some crazy plan to save or change the world. She wasn't another Renee or even Alan, but she was as smart as them. Perhaps she served her purpose, having generated the New World formula, and is of no more use to the cryo-archon. And that's why she was allowed to die. The Tsaritsa strikes me as the kind of ruler who is not specifically moved by the suffering of her people if it conflicts with the bigger picture. Not unlike the Heavenly Principles themselves. I suppose when playing such a grand game of chess, there are bound to be pawns who will meet their end in the pursuit of the checkmate. As for Dottore, I don't think we've seen the last of him at all. Now, At first, it did seem as though the glitch effect that everyone experienced at the end of the quest may be connected to him making a comeback. But now, with what we've learned about the moon's shadow in Lantern Rite, I think it's much more concerned with an altering reality. The Grand Dream is adjusting to the updates, it would seem. And one such adjustment is the erasure of the false moon, which was actually a projection. The shadow moon, as Zhongli called it. This brings us neatly to the other major plot of this update, which was the case of Shattered Moon Envoy Zibai and her 3 deadly selves, now made available to consider because that shadow moon was fading away. And interestingly, her character story and the Lantern Rite quest shed some light on exactly who Zhongli might have been. I have a video coming up that will go in depth on just why it's becoming more and more likely that the Morning Stars are an entity we need to take note of, and that Zhongli and his contemporary Deshret might have been 2 of them. But for now, let's address what exactly was going on with Zibai in this quest. Who even is Zibai? One could begin by saying she's a dear old friend of Rex Lapis's, perhaps even one who remembers Osmanthus wine. One who it became obvious in this quest he missed dearly. He knew her before she was a complicated, mentally unstable cosplaying adeptus, when she was simply a moon envoy tasked with nourishing her people in the region now known as the Chasm, but was previously long gone. Likely, the upside-down city in the Chasm is the leftover remains of that place. Yes, Zhongli knew her well, it seems, but that's only part of her story. If we go into more detail about who Zibai is, it gets more complicated because she became 3, and only one of them is who became known as the famous White Horse Adeptus. The White Horse Adeptus who frequently appears in Liyue's legends is Zichao, the 3rd deadly self severed by Zibai. She was the white horse that the elder of Qingce village said would assist the campaigns of the Lord of Geo. She was the daughter of Time, known to the clans of Chenyuvale. She was the gold-eyed Celadon mare, referenced in the Sanctification of Taudo. She was even the White Horse Adeptus who leapt across the chasm of 500 years, according to the genealogy of the Lu clan. In the days of the Archon War, she was freed by the Geo-Archon from a painting of Zhanzhu the Moon Devourer, and entered into a contract to aid him in his battles. This is from her profile character story. But the references of her have been present in the game for years, hidden in stories and books. As the sun shone upon his face, the young man stood up in his lethargy, half opening his eyes. Only then did he discover that which had disturbed his slumber, a pair of eyes sparkling like amber gold. It's getting late, lazy bones. The slender, golden-eyed woman leaned over slightly, her long platinum hair flowing over her shoulder. Her words bore annoyance, but her eyes hid a smile. The young man had come to this valley of hidden jade to cultivate his arts, only to unexpectedly encounter an adeptus one night as she too passed through these same woods. She wore a long white cotton robe, and the pearly raincoat and hat were about her. Her eyes were dazzling and gentle, yet indifferent, and her voice was elegant and tranquil, like jade that falls into a clear spring. She spoke of tales, ancient and absorbing, so much so that he forgot the moon's rise and fall, the cycle of and orbit of the stars. Even the first croaks of frogs and cries of the cicadas at dawn slipped away from him. The mountain people once viewed her as Time's daughter, like a white horse leaping from a pure spring, one whom no shackles could bind. Just as it was with her proud mother, so it was with her. No wall or eggshell could bar her path. In the days when mortals received the blessings of the heavens, great heroes and wandering champions would visit the clear springs for her blessing, fighting over the tenderness she left in her hurried wake. But when the moon palace collapsed, the chariot fell, and the three sisters were slain. These legends became lost alongside disaster's descent and the downfall of bygone peoples. The heavens rained down cruel order, and from that day, the stars stilled their orbits, and the earth ceased to turn. As for her, she had no choice but to be trapped within the shell of the starry sky, forced to tarry within this stagnant foreign land, awaiting her mother's 1,000 threads, awaiting the erosion of hardy stone, awaiting the next encounter from beyond. This detailed description is from Springs of Clear Jade, a book that has existed in the game since 5.2. But there's an even older reference since 1.1 in the book Moonlit Bamboo Forest. The bamboo forest of Mount Chingshe is the verdant home to many fables. As night fell, the woman garbed in white began to recount many stories to the young lad, ancient tales that the lad had never heard before. Long ago, 3 bright moons once hung high in the night sky. These 3 moons were sisters, their years numbering more than those of the Geo Archon, and their year of birth predating the very bedrock upon which Liyue Harbor now rests. The mysterious woman proceeds to tell detailed stories of the moons, the wolves, and the angels that we now know to be true. And when she pauses, the woman raised her head and gazed at the moon through the sea of bamboo. Her long, slender neck was covered in the silver light, and her eyes shone gold. These references from Springs of Hidden Jade and Moonlit Bamboo Forest paint a picture of who she was to the people of Liyue way back then, but they really only knew a piece of her. When Zibai, moved with compassion, guilt, and defiance towards the heavenly principles cleansing, attempted to hold back a celestial nail, the one that now lies buried deep in the chasm, she was of course killed in the confrontation. Not even the moon envoy can withstand such power. But Ishtaroth, who had already warned her not to go, intervened in the moment before her death. And so she froze time upon Zibai in the instant before her death, causing her to split into her 3 deadly selves. A very special technique that Zibai learned from Zhongli of all people. In a time long past, when Zibai descended upon the mortal world as an envoy of the moons, she befriended a being most unusual. Though he bore the semblance of a mortal man, one with a striking visage, he could ride the clouds and mist, move mountains and fill seas, shatter rocks and grind jade to dust. Yet, despite possessing powers that could rival the divine, he was not of the angelic race, much to Zibai's amazement. One day, they agreed to meet high in the mountains to duel in the Adeptus arts. Yet, when the hour arrived, her opponent was nowhere to be seen. There was naught but a distant rumble on the horizon. Zibai followed the sound and discovered 3 identical figures aloft in the clouds, engaged in a fierce confrontation. Amidst the clashing of their blades, she could hear, faintly, a battle cry. The Lord of Geo, Heaven's star. Before long, the fighting ended, and the 3 figures merged into one, alighting before her. It was none other than her astonishing friend. This matter piqued Zibai's curiosity, and her friend did not withhold his secrets, imparting them most generously. And so she came to learn the ancient art of trifactor excision, or how to excise the 3 deadly selves. These so-called deadly selves are the impure thoughts and wicked desires that pollute the practitioner's mind. To cast them aside is to glimpse the unmarred self, pure and clean. But Zibai, as an envoy of heaven and the 3 moons, harbored no such wayward thoughts. No matter how hard she tried, she could not sever her 3 deadly selves. This is from Zibai's character story. It's no surprise then that after the events of the night that she died, Zibai was now very capable of hatred, disgust, sadness, or mockery. And so, the 3 deadly selves appeared. Zibai became Zizhe, trapped in the chasm asleep, Ziju, who was actually trapped in the projection of the false moon, and Zichao, who was trapped in that painting that Zhongli skillfully reproduced, only to be freed to become an adeptus under contract with him. The opportunity for the release of Ziju from the shadow moon was only made possible because of the fact that the old moon projection was now obsolete and glitching away, which meant her 3 deadly selves and the pieces of her actual soul that they harbored could be reunited to create whole living Zibai once more. Zhongli wasn't going to let this opportunity pass by. Still, I wonder, why did the shadow moon begin to disappear specifically in response to wishes? And what prevented this phenomenon from even touching the shadow moon in years past? Is it because the moon, which it was the shadow of, is now out of place? Or is it something worse? Could it be that the location of the frost moon outside of the false sky had been a calculated move to preserve the integrity of the eggshell? And what's really happening is that piece by piece the whole thing and its projections are coming down. Are we going to have another unreconciled stars situation, with constellations themselves losing their place in the sky? Seems Liyue is always the first to feel these major effects that come cascading down with the activities of a high-level harbinger elsewhere in the world. Like the situation during the last Lantern Rite after Capitano had flooded the ley lines with the Conrian souls he'd been carrying. And now with the introduction of a new moon. Say, isn't Mondstadt usually the next to feel the effects? Like in paralogism? Perhaps when Varka finally makes it home, he won't be met with wine and song, but a new strange phenomena to deal with. Maybe the Tsaritsa intends to wrought change in the world little by little. Or maybe the case of Zibai's many selves and the placement of them in inanimate objects says something about what might actually be contained in the Gnosis and why it is that the Tsaritsa is collecting them. I have so much more to say about this update, even though it seems I've been quiet for so long. I still need to talk about Itlua's epic world quest, all the awesome lore for Boreas and Koitar, not to mention all the new info we just got on Zhongli, and the Traveler's controversial outfit description. I told you all this year was going to open the floodgates, so get ready. Good luck to anyone wishing for Zibai. I myself am waiting for Varka. Been waiting since he was first mentioned a long time ago. I've even been saving some of my contest winnings to make sure I can get him, so wish me luck. Happy Lantern Rite, or perhaps Happy New Year instead. And as always, I'll see you all in the next one.